Good afternoon, colleagues in development. The future of our nation depends on the worth, capabilities and motivation of today's youth. A strong, motivated young Bhutan guarantees a strong, bright future. His Majesty the King, welcome to your UN House. Bhutan Dialogues is an open platform for dynamic conversations on issues of national interest with the objective to listen, share, and sharpen our thinking in pursuit of social progress. It is also a good networking opportunity. Before leaving, I invite you to speak to one new person you have never spoken to before. That's one definition of networking. Well, when it comes to the youth, and today's topic, it is Youth Matters in Development. And we often have a tendency to think about this in terms of employment or unemployment. More than half of Bhutan's population are the youth. Youth unemployment in Bhutan is estimated to be over 13%. And here in the urban areas, it's actually 23%. The government of Bhutan recognizes the fact that there is a serious need to reduce youth unemployment through direct interventions from the Ministry of Labour and Human Resources. Recently, the United Nations and Gross National Happiness produced a report speaking about the challenges around youth, and spoke about some of the recommendations for solutions, including strengthening the technical, vocational, educational and training network, strengthening entrepreneurial skills, strengthening career counselling, spreading awareness about government projects, and promoting private sector growth. But of course, the youth is more than just employment or unemployment. We are fortunate today to have as our host Dr. Karma Phuntsho, who wrote an article for the Druk Journal. And that Druk Journal had a whole issue on youth. And I want to quote to you something that Dr. Karma wrote. He said, "Being a young Bhutanese today, particularly in an urban settlement, is not easy. In about half a century, Bhutan has gone through changes that most other countries take many centuries to make. As a historian, I often say that Bhutan has changed more in the past 50 years than the 500 years before that. It is inevitable that those born at the height of such a socio-cultural shift are, to say the least, unsettled. Bhutan research shows that over 31% of college students are addicted to the internet. We are fortunate today to have Dr. Phuntsho from the General Hospital, who will be our speaker for the July Bhutan Dialogues. He will be dealing at that point with the issues of depression, anxiety, stress, and related matters. The reason I speak about him is that he happens to be with us today, and in many respects, today's Bhutan Dialogues builds a great foundation stone for the follow-up in July. Our guest speaker today is Aum Dorji Ohm. She is the Executive Director of the Bhutan Youth Development Fund. Aum is also an instructor in alternative healing and enjoys practicing yoga and meditation. She also enjoys interior and fashion designing. During her spare time, Aum enjoys volunteering for animal shelters and care. I only wish to quote one thing additional about Dr. Karma. He takes an active part in the continued sustainable development of his own village, Uro Yakcho, and its main village festival, because it sustains its cultural event, which serves as a social fabric that channels values, knowledge, skills, and practice transmissions. Believe it or not, the festival attracts as many as 400 tourists from as many as 50 nationalities. As someone who knows, speaking personally, as someone who knows something about village life, I'm sure it is one of our primary fulcrums, those of us who are fortunate to have been born in a village. I say it's one of my primary fulcrums just because I know how many dreams I have of my home village in Ireland. After the tea, we will have a presentation on how to write a good CV from Phuntsho at Loden. Thank you, Phuntsho. The purpose of this add-on training opportunity is that those colleagues who wish to learn more about writing a good CV will have that opportunity to further strengthen your skill sets. Of course, the tea that we are providing and coffee and even some momos, I understand today, are an opportunity to speak to the colleagues who are here, but also reach out for the more senior colleagues you see here today. Ask the most bizarre questions on them. They are here to help the young people of Bhutan in whatever ways they can. And lastly, as I mentioned at the start, don't forget to speak to at least one new person today whom you haven't previously spoken to. With that, let me hand over the mic to my good friend, Dr. Karma Phuntsho.
So I'm Kuzu Zangpo, and welcome to the 8th session of Bhutan Dialogues. We want to thank you for joining us in this forum, which we wish to develop as a forum for civil conversations to sharpen our critical thinking, to practice mindful listening, right speech, so that we can define our ideas of social progress, our thoughts of development out of past, from where we have come, the future, where we are going, and so forth. With your experience working with the youth, working in education, it's a great honor for us to have you talk about youth matters and development today. As usual, I would start with the question of how you came to be where you are right now. What shaped you or inspired you or made you who you are right now in your current position as the head of Bhutan Youth Development Fund?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Kuzuzangpo, to all young friends. I'm glad that there are a lot of young friends. When I see you all, I'm reminded of how valuable and ancient I am becoming. So, and also because it's the 8th Bhutan Dialogue, so therefore 8 is a lucky number. So I'll introduce myself as somebody a little superstitious also. I am here in front of you not because I chose to be. I am what I am, and because of certain things that led me to it, events and things that led me to it. I did not have the opportunity to, or maybe I was not aware that I had to set a goal and this is where I want to go. Unfortunately, during my time, that was not there. But I'm glad that I've been able to have good friends and all, and led me to where I am. And I do not at all regret. Had a lot of learning experiences all the way along. So I think the rest of the things I will not say, because I think that's not important who I am. But what's important is how the processes that took me to be where I am.
Is there any specific personal experience or anecdotes you can share about what made you dedicate your life to youth?
Well, I always aspired to be a judge, because those days, I'm talking like, I'm born in the 60s, okay? So we didn't have many judges. Now we call them champions. So I always wanted to be a judge. And I tried to talk like a judge also. And then after some time I said, oh maybe, then I started getting interested in frogs and this white worms, Kalabubsalamaval, I don't know what you call it. But I remember my mom had this huge garden. So I used to pick those white worms, big fat white worms. And we had this big drum, where you put the tar, the bitumen. So it was filled with rainwater. And I would pick those worms and I would put it in that drum filled with water. And then I used to see whether the worm could swim. And of course the worm could not swim, it drowned. And I said, oh, useless worm, and I took another one. And I don't know, because it's not that I was not compassionate, but I don't know what made me do all this and started getting interested in frogs. So then I thought, okay, I'll be a doctor. But that didn't happen for me. So I landed up becoming a teacher quite by accident. I was literally pushed into this profession by people who thought I would be a good teacher. And then that's how I won't say teacher, but I think an educationist. And I have not stopped since then. So this is...
So are you grateful to the worms for making you an educator?
Yes, but I think I drowned so many worms.
Now, as we talk about youth, one of the things that a lot of young people here wouldn't necessarily know, and I also personally don't exactly know, who do we call a youth, a young person? Does YDF have a definition of youth?
Okay, if you go by the youth policy, then it's 13 to 24. But how many of you here feel you're still a youth? Yes. So I think for the YDF, that is what we like to believe.
That, some people who are 54 are raising their hands.
I mean, I saw a sir here. So I think
13 to 34.
It's ideally 13 to, because that's what our policy says. But YDF, we have not been so restrictive. We, especially our drug education, some of our programs we cannot say, okay, you are not, you are 25 and or 24 and something months, and say you cannot take this program when there is a need. So our program is basically on needs.
Now, when you look at youth, age is one way of looking at it, and say 30 to 34 will be defined as youth. But the youth situation seems to be so complex, and there are many problems. YDF obviously is here to address a lot of these problems. So I would like to query further into the issues of youth. One of the things that struck me earlier is, when do we consider a young person to have reached an age of discretion, age of majority? Traditionally, we had even 15-year-old girls becoming housewives and mothers and taking full responsibility of the household. We had 18-year-old boys who would be considered a fully grown adult, able to be a head of a house or a father. But now we see a lot of young people who are so immature, even in their 20s. Is that your impression? And what is causing it, if you think that is the case?
I actually have to ask you, how do you define immaturity and maturity? Because I think the way I understand would be the behavior, the development as in the body, and but is it maturity in the sense of wisdom and...
Let's talk about the ability for decision making, for responsibility. Do you think modern day youth are as capable of decision making and responsibility as people of your generation were?
That's a tricky thing. I have to be very careful, all young people here. So let me speak from the heart. My generation, I was there when the third king was there. So I've seen three kings. I've served three kings. But I was a little girl when the third king was still living. So I remember how Thimphu was. Thimphu was never like this. So quickly it happened, so much changes. I was born in a fortunate family, so I I was also a pampered child, being the eldest. And of course after me, many, I come from a large family. So I went to a good school, so I I used to ask, and one of my, my mentors is my husband, who's sitting there and not looking at me. so I said, how was life during your time? Because I went to a very good school, and I was pampered by my parents. I had what I wanted, so I had to ask the better half. So I can tell you from that perspective. I think during their days, they had a very difficult time. Many of the people are poor. So they had to take responsibilities at a very early age. And one of the stories that touched me, what he told me, was when they were in the school. It was a boarding school. They had to walk to school. If they had a horse, they're lucky. Others, they had to walk many, many miles to reach the school. They had to carry their own ration to school. And then every Saturday, I believe, they have to go and fetch the firewood. And we are not talking about small twigs and, the Bukhari firewood. I believe the firewood means logs. So they have to go early morning to the forest, into the forest, and then drag those logs and reach those logs to the school before breakfast. So I said, oh my God, were you never scared of the forest? Because, now you see bears mauling people. So I said, weren't you scared? Didn't your teachers even warn you? They said, no, they never thought of that. So they had a lot of responsibilities. And education was something that they had to, they were lucky to have that education. So I guess these are some of the conditions that sort of made them more responsible and more matured. They saw the hard part, the hard side of the life. But whereas our young people, do you go and fetch firewood to cook your breakfast? Okay. So
they probably go to the gas station. Now, but so you have spent your youth in the 70s and 80s. And now you're working with the youth in the 21st century.
And 90s, I was still 90s. Young then.
So you were a youth in the 20th century, and now you're guiding the youth in the 21st century. What are the new challenges, the new problems, the new issues youth face in the new century?
Of course, it's diverse, the challenges are
the main ones, the outstanding problems.
I think these challenges came about, and I blame people like us actually, and we apologize to all the young people. We are very sorry for bringing those challenges to you, and then we say you are the problems. So in a way we are to be blamed because we made life too comfortable for them. And then like Jerry here was saying, you read from the book and you said this program, that program, and I was just thinking, and I wrote it down very quickly, are we doing too many things for you? Are we equipping you with that to be able to take risks? I think young people, you have to answer. But in a way, we are quite guilty of doing that. We are sorry that we made you go into drugs. We are sorry that there's so much of social problems we have created. And divorces, broken families, it's the parents, we who have created that. And I think because of that, we have kept people like Dr. Phuntsho very employed.
So it is certainly the failure of the parents' generation which led to the problems that the young people today face. But then it's not just the failure of the parents. It's a new world that the young people are living in today. It's the 21st century. For instance, all the internet and social media information that they're inundated with. So what's the challenge like in that respect? When you work with young people, how serious is the issue related to social media and screen addiction?
First of all, I think this whole thing about internet, again, it's us. Because we are not technically savvy like you all. So we think the problem is with you. So sometimes it's good to reverse and say, if I was more technically savvy, I was more, and I know that some of my office staff are here, I have to call my IT person, can you come and see what's wrong here? And he just presses one and then it's solved, So it's actually how we use it and how we understand it better. Of course, it's very sad when I see, like in my little small family, we're all there and we hardly meet, all of us together, and everyone has this phone. and then we are busy on the phone, and then in fact there was one story that this Filipino teacher who told us that in Philippines, Bhutan is nothing, in Philippines the couples, they go out and have a dinner in a good restaurant, romantic candle, and they're like celebrating perhaps their wedding anniversary, and so much in love, reminded of all that. Maybe doctor doesn't know how it is to be romantic and be married and celebrating anniversaries. But
with a smartphone.
So that's exactly what they do in the restaurant in Philippines. So there's the husband, there's the wife sitting, and they come. Oh, ambience is great. There's a soft music playing, and then the husband is, "What are you choosing? What menu?" And the wife is saying, "How about this?" It's serious. So that is how extreme it is in the Philippines, and it's already come here to Bhutan. So internet, I think, is good if you know how to use it, but to overuse it, then of course it's then you need rehabilitation, treatment and rehabilitation. But interestingly, I was asking one of my staff, because she has young children. So I don't have young children. Both my children are grown up. So I said, "Are your children addicted to internet, smartphones?" And this colleague of mine says, "No, because we have." Her son is very young, but her daughter, who was in class 4 or 5, no, we have not given her a phone yet. So I believe she complains, "All my friends, all my cousins have a phone. Why am I not allowed?" And then I believe the father said, "We'll give you an iPhone 7 when you grow up." And he said, "Oh, by the time it's obsolete, So the children actually are asking, "How does she manage?" She says, "Oh, it's okay." As they will complain, but then they don't, scream and stamp their feet. So I think it's also how the parents actually monitor. And just to add on, I was talking to a group of young people, who are interns in my office. And I was interested because I was coming for this Bhutan Dialogue. I said, let me hear from the horse's mouth how, they react to internet. And so they said they are not allowed to carry phones in the classroom. And I said, why? Because they said the teachers feel that, your attention will be taken away. And so I said, what would you like to have? If you are the teacher, what would you do? And they said, I wish the teachers allowed us to use the phone or the iPad and share that experience. And then that would be learning. So that was from the young people's perspective. But from our screened perspective, it's bad. And then the parents are also buying phones and giving the children.
So both in terms of screen addiction, in terms of substance abuse and other social problems, it seems parents have a major role to play.
Yes.
And we are looking also at a parents' generation that are largely lost. People actually don't know how to spend their own time. They don't know what they should value. So what can we do to educate these parents to be more responsible, conscientious parents? Is YDF doing anything on that front?
Unfortunately, not so much in the internet aspect. But we do, we haven't really done parenting program as such, apart from the addicts who come for treatment at the Institute of Wellbeing. But I would guess that I think first of all, young people are looking for role model. Now, if you have to ask these young people who is your role model, they might say Nelson Mandela. Who else would you say?
Messi,
yes. Ronaldo, no? And they really don't. Maybe they'll say my mom, at the most. But I think it's time now that parents actually take this position as role models, and not just parents, but even peers. So if the parents can be responsible and share the responsibility with and switch off their iPad and their internet, and I was just thinking, we have this pedestrian day. And earlier we had almost every week, on a Tuesday. Now then it went to month. Now we have once a year. I mean, we could also have a switch off all these gadgets for that, So I mean, it's how you actually, how innovative you can be.
No, this digital detoxing is a very good practice, and I don't have TV in my house, and then every now and then, especially if it's a very important day, I'll switch off everything and try to take a retreat from the digital tools. And I think this is a very good therapeutic exercise. But now, parents are one group that are responsible for the upbringing of the children, but we also have our young people spend a vast majority of their day in the schools. What is your take on the education system? How is that molding our young people? Is the education cause of some of the young people's problems? Or are they doing at least something to address the problems?
Now that I'm not in the Ministry of Education, I do not know. So I might have the other side of, other side opinion. But when I was a teacher, I enjoyed every moment. I enjoyed every moment, and if I could enjoy every moment, I know my children were enjoying. But now that I'm on the other side, and then, like I told you, my children are all grown up. I don't look at but I looked at some of the workbooks of my brother's children, and I was actually quite taken aback. So again, I got my group of this young specimen before me, and I said, I need to talk to you. Tell me one day how learning takes place in your class, in your school. And what these young people told me was something of a great concern. It's lecture. The curriculum is very good, but how it is delivered is stereotype. These are not my words. These are the words I'm quoting. It's lecture, it's boring, no discussions, no critical thinking, no problem solving, mugging up, memorizing. And I was also quite surprised that English was taught as the nature of Chomsky, talking about the nature of language. I mean, that is for language teachers, not students who are learning how to read and write and decipher. So that was quite shocking for me. So I definitely see that it has changed. The education curriculum is beautiful, but all that shines not, all that glitters is not gold. Because what's actually happening in the real life in the classrooms, and in fact, the learning should not be in the classrooms also.
I mean, I'm not even sure if the curriculum is wonderful.
Well, it's supposed to be. It's GNH infused. So am I told.
So there is not much problem with the curriculum, but there is a great deal of program with the pedagogy and the teaching personality.
The thought process of how a national curriculum should look is, I would say, like when we look at a constitution, it's so perfect. So it looks perfect, but then it's only when you actually implement it, then you would be evaluating it properly. But I don't think so it's even implemented the way it is supposed to be. Again, it's not me, it's the children that I was talking to, the young people who told me this. So definitely there is something really something wrong at the education. What's actually happening in the classroom.
So let's move on to some suggestions for solutions to these problems. YDF has been spearheading in starting projects to solve youth problems. So for the benefit of the audience here, tell us briefly what are the various programs that you run and how they address the specific problems.
Many of these programs are actually not our initiative. It is driven by young people themselves. Of course, they don't say we want A, B, C, but they come and express, and then we said, hey, this is a program that may work. So actually, it's not we who have come up with the solutions, it's young people who have come. And one of the feathers in a hat is one project that we do in the village. 21 villages are benefiting from this, and this whole project is called My Gakit Village, My Happy Village. And this was actually started in Pomtangla. By young people, the young volunteers in action. They found a village of only ladies, and they made that a success story. They adopted that community, and that inspiration we said, hey, if you can do something like this, in a small community, we got a little ambitious. Why not do it for 21 villages? So my Gagit village is one of our pride and doing great work. And then the other one, again, feather in a hat, is the Institute of Wellbeing. It started from this treatment of people living with, abusing substances. But then, because the scale of the whole infrastructure, everything was so big, so we said we can do just more than treatment alone. We can give birth to an institute called the Institute of Wellbeing. Institute of Wellbeing, not just for the body but also for the mind, emotion. So that is one of our thing. Of course, we do have like leadership, young leadership program, child protection, sponsor a monk, and then we have young volunteers in action is one. We have in fact almost 6,000 young volunteers all over Dzongkhla. It's one of our. They are the outreach. They can reach where we cannot, and they are the ones who have the feelers and feel and bring it to us.
So when I look at the names you've used for your programs, particularly the first two you mentioned, one is the Gakki village,
yes.
The other one is Institute of Wellbeing and Gakki being almost synonymous,
yes.
And you seem to be more concerned about the overall holistic well-being or the inner spiritual sort of well-being of a person. Do you think that there is something lacking with regard to the spiritual side of life in both the society of parents and also in the mainstream education system? Should spiritual components come in more effectively to address the issues that the young people face today?
Yes, Lord. Spirituality is already with all of us. We are spiritual beings. But it's just that we have not been able to awaken that or realize that or identify with that. I think the problem here is spirituality being confused with religion. Rather than looking at spirituality to understand your religion, we have taken it the other way. So spirituality is something that we already have within us, and I think it's one of the most powerful tools which can sort of awaken a lot of faculties, and perhaps it's because of that not understanding that has led to all these problems that we have previously been discussing.
Have our society become too secular in a way, too sort of materialistic as a result?
Secular or materialistic?
Both. Because we have missed on the spiritual upbringing, because we had this period when we were enamored by Western secularistic scientific education, which is totally based on matter. Have we lost this heritage we had of giving attention to our inner spirit?
I think we have not lost it, but we have not paid attention to it. And that is what is, I think people are now, instead of using science and all to validate your own understanding of what life is and what living is and what spirituality is all about, I think we are now relying too much on scientific facts to validate your own spirituality. So that's where the confusion is, or the misunderstanding is.
I went through this chapter in my life where I was a monk, and a lot of people of your age group who have got Western school and college education would come with English language and Western scientific knowledge to look down on the traditional monks and local elders and healers. It looks like we have now sort of taken the reverse, and you have come back to a point where our sort of generation of your age group are appreciating the traditional spiritual.
By the way, I'm older than you. I do not belong to that category. I think, again, it's the upbringing. Remember, I was born in the 60s, okay? And in other side of the world, all the hippies and trying to find an identity and drugs and sex and all was there, rampant. But in Bhutan, we had these parents who was teaching us values. But they did not make us understand what these were. Like, for instance, my dad says, if the parents say that there's a black horse tied there, and you say, if the parents say that's a white horse, then we as obedient sons and daughters, we have to say yes, although we know it's a white horse. So, I mean, we were trained like that. But now with education, like My parents never came from a formal system education, but now we as the privileged people who have actually had this opportunity to go and study outside, I think that has sort of not crippled us, but rather made us more aware of how you. Fortunately, I went to a school where we had to do a lot of critical thinking, problem solving. So I think that sort of aided me in understanding that why was I told to do this? And then you relate, and then you are able to understand. But I think young people are looking for answers. It's time now for the monks to also come out and then not keep everything like a secret teaching, but rather say, you want the secret teaching, then you need to understand this, so that this is what you will understand. So I think now there is, even in the monasteries, the monks cannot sit in the comfort of the altar room and the mantras and the rituals. They need to come out. They need to come out, because I think we have a lot of young people who are thirsty. Am I right? Or hungry for spirituality, to understanding that.
I mean, while I would agree that our traditional elders and monks have failed to sort of formulate our spiritual heritage in a contemporary idiom in a very appealing, attractive manner to the young people, isn't it also partly the disillusionment that we are going through with modernity and especially Western culture that's leading to this dissatisfaction with what we have achieved and now wants to come back to spirituality?
That, of course, ideally, if you look at the patterns, the phases, this is usually how a human journey goes, But then I think also, like right now, we are making things very comfortable as parents, as educators, as CSOs serving the young people. We are making things too comfortable. We are, in a way, we are almost programming you to think the way we want. We are allowing you to live our dreams. So maybe if we took a seat back, step back, and say we need to equip them with their own life skills, because they eventually have to live in the real world, rather than being too protective.
So do you believe in hardship being good for the young people?
Not hardship, but allow them to go through this. It's like a seesaw, no? So allow your children and ourselves to go up, have the highs and lows, because it's only when we have the lows that you know that I need to get up there. So that's the beauty of life, because once you're down, if you can really feel I cannot stay in this, I'm not comfortable like this, I'm not happy, then you have the aspiration to rise.
But I would be very worried about that when you sink to that low point, a lot of the young people are not equipped with the resilience to deal with it. Yes. They easily break down, and that's why we are having problems of substance abuse or alcoholism or suicide even. So how do you cope with these highs and lows as you recommend them to have it?
Again, it boils down to how the guidance, the teachers, when we always say parents, but it's not just parents, it's people like you and people like me and Jerry, and all of us play a part in this. To create this environment, not a safe environment, but an environment where they can survive in that. And I mean, I think it's absurd if you really fall to the pit bottom that, everybody, if you go down, you always want to come up, no? And I think education has a lot of role. Besides education, it's people like us and spirituality. And I think when you talk of spirituality, it's also the relationship, the harmony in relationship.
So one thing you said earlier, which really struck my mind, is you said you enjoyed being a teacher when you were a teacher. And I remember you also mentioning that we should enjoy the process much more than expecting the result. But a lot of the things that we do today, education is all based on examination and the results we achieve from examinations. Development work is all defined by targets and goals. How do we make young people, working people, enjoy the process? I mean, do you have any personal tips or techniques on how to do that?
Maybe my own experience and understanding. By the way, I really like this question. This goes also for our UN partners and CSOs like us. and teachers, if there are any teachers. We need to question ourselves. And it was just a year back when I started asking a lot of questions to myself. In the YDF, we have to, the organization, actually the organization are people. And for this organization to thrive, we need to have certain achievements. We need to build this credibility. So whatever we did, it was mostly to add another feather, like I used the word feather on the hat. So we were adding this feather on the hat. So that became our ultimate goal. We forgot that how many lives were touched. Where were these lives? So rather than looking at the process of how this, like I was telling you, I enjoyed every moment, every day when I was teaching. So that process, we never really looked at. We only are so goal-oriented. And I think even in the UN, you have poverty eradication by years, so and so. And in fact, just a month ago, we had this violence against children, the 8th Roundtable Conference. And I was sitting there because I'm one of the members of the NACG. And we were sitting around, and then all the experts, all the researchers, and I think child protection was there, a story there for 23 years, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if we have some child. Anyway, this child, after this is CRC, this child protection, and we are still fighting that. Why after 20-something decades, we are still fighting the same problem? And then yet sitting there, I was just listening, I didn't say much. But then there were people say, oh, we're going to do a study on this. So they're doing more studies and researches. And when are we going to end it? So, I mean, the goals are important, yes. But then towards what? For our satisfaction? Because we were able to eradicate that, or so many people got a home, or is it the quality and the process of your, journey? So I think in the YDF also we say, okay, we have done enough now of credibility building and statistics, but now we need to go through the process and see how we evolve through each process. Because when all of us evolve through this process, then I think we can have a generation to look forward to.
Nice. Now my final question before I ask the audience for questions is, you're leading one of the biggest CSOs in Bhutan, and you've obviously come a long way to become a female leader. Do you have any habits or any techniques that you use to always remain sharp and active, successful? How do you keep yourself always on top of things? Do you have any tricks that you can share with particularly our young audience?
Get married. It's a joke.
That's
only
Jerry.
Dr. Karma, he's not married. And I knew that only a few minutes ago, or half an hour ago.
Half an hour ago, let's say.
So get married.
But beside that, what other advices do you have? I'll take that to heart.
Okay. For me, what has been, I don't know about sharp and all, but to be aware and to be more sensitive. I think what I practice is, first of all, the kind of food I eat. I'm vegetarian, not to say that those who eat meat are bad, but vegetarian actually, because I'm a pranic healer. Vegetarian, when you eat anything that is vegetarian, it cleanses a lot of your energy. So I'm a pranic healer, so therefore I believe that if you want to be healthy, your energy has to be healthy. And when you eat meat, again, I'm not discouraging. Okay, eat meat because you enjoy it, it's okay. But the understanding is that when there is meat, well, it's not because, okay, I sacrifice my life for you. It's not done. The cow doesn't come, or the pig doesn't come, or the chicken. They have the will to live, but you end that will. And so there's a lot of pain. So I don't believe in taking the pain energy. So I consume only vegetables and fruits and things like that. And of course, I have my share of my own practice. Meditation, mindfulness is something that I love doing. not so much sitting these days because I'm not too well physically. But definitely in my everyday right now, as I speak to you and I'm in front of you, I'm also aware of what I'm saying. So these kind of things, and then I do a little bit of what do you call, cleansing my aura, the energy body. So I think these are the things that, and of course healthy relation, living in harmony. I live in my home, I just have my husband, me, a girl who helps me. She's like a sister to me, daughter to me, and I have my 4 dogs. That's the family I live in, and we live in harmony. So I think all these things actually make you good.
Yes. Thank you very much for those tips, and you were very polite and diplomatic in not discouraging people to from eating meat. I would have actively said, please don't eat meat because it's environmentally, health-wise, economically very bad. That's what I normally say.
You should not dictate, do this.
No, discourage, not dictate. Anyone has question? No? Please ask Aum, take the opportunity.
My name is Shejun Dorji. I'm known as a rapper, more in Bhutan, but by profession I am a corporate business analyst. And recently I've been given a name Raptivist because I use rap as a means of social activism. Okay, coming to my question, 2 weeks ago I made a visit to the Youth Development and Recreational Center in Chukha. And I still have the scar of seeing the 34 young kids there, and I was very shocked to see that there were equal number of boys and girls in there, and more than 50% of them came from divorced parents, and most of them were from poor family background, and what's more disturbing is that once this is as per what the policemen who were in the facility told me, that once they are out, there's not much plan of what to do with the youths that get out of the facility once they are they just mix with us, and then they are sometimes they they are they feel like they are misfits in the society once they are out of the facility, and then that leads to repeated crimes, and then they end up going to the senior correctional facility. And the reason why I say this is because we have this youth policy in our country that it was adopted in 2011 or something. But what is more important than the youth policy is that we have an action plan for the youth, which we don't have in our country. And so my question is who is responsible? Is it the Department of Youth and Sports? Is it the ministry? Or is it the civil society organizations that are working towards the benefit of the youth in the country? So my question is, what are the steps that are being taken by YDF or all the concerned stakeholders in order to have a national youth action plan for Bhutan? And if nothing is being done, I would very seriously request let us do something together so that we have this action plan, and then I keep saying that we have had enough of dialogues. We had so many discussions where we're talking about the same topic all the time, but are we coming up with recommendations, and are those recommendations being implemented? So after having come up with the action plan, let's act, and then only I think we will be able to reduce these problems to a certain extent. So this is my question, especially regarding the youth action plan for Bhutan. So what's being done towards that?
Thank you, Kezang. I'm his fan. There's so much of literature in he writes.
Do you rap? No.
Try me. I think I'll have to take from you. But it's a talent. Probably I'll be better off working in a CSO. I'm very happy that you raised this question. Way back in 2005, in the absence of a youth policy, the YDF, we also didn't have the direction. And there was $1 million given as a gift from His Majesty Drukgyal, and we don't know where to put this money. So and there was no youth policy. So we partnered with the Minister of Education, and then we said that we need to have a youth policy. But this youth policy had to take time. It takes a lot of time. So the first step we did was we said, even the situation of young people in Bhutan, we didn't even have a study in that. So 2005 to 2006, we got the Melbourne University, the faculty, some of the faculty who work with the youth in the youth department, and we got them to do this together with us. And I was fortunate to travel with them across the country, and we did this study. The big, lot of money we spent on that. Save the Children did actually, and then the long-term goal was in another 5 years' time we should have this youth policy. And I'm glad that we actually were able to move that forward, and the youth policy was there. I also understand that the action plan of youth action plan was already there in formulation. It is already there, but I don't know whether it has it's implemented. And the lead agency, that is Department of Youth and Sports, DYS. But we are a stakeholder to it. We have made a lot of contribution because we know this. I'm not really sure whether, in fact, I was going through that policy. I don't know how I knew that some questions on that would come. But I do realize that, yes, you're right, that if there is this guideline, the action plan needs to be shared. But I think it's already there. Tenzin, Roma's not here. Tenzin, would you know? Okay. So it's still not there. In action, it is still...
If the document is not there, I think...
no, it's there.
Not
yeah, it's there. You just log on to Bhutan Youth Policy and Action Plan. You will find. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you a yes or no. Or, I'm not very definite. But then, thanks to internet, these are the things that you should look for. Saves time.
Kezam, thank you for the question and for being an activist. I want to add a little piece of information to what you raised about the YDRC in Chuka. A few years ago, a police captain who was the former head of the center approached me, and we worked together to create an entrepreneurial venture for the graduates, for the pass-outs of that center. And we went around raising funds. Unfortunately, we didn't have resources to do that ourselves. And as we were processing the funds from Save the Children, who initially volunteered to offer the funds, a lot of these young people, when they come out, as Kezam pointed out, are disowned by their families, are not liked by their peer groups, so they easily relapse into their former habits. And by the time we were putting in place this plan, a lot of them already got rounded up by the police and sent back because of some petty crimes they committed. So that was a really sad episode. I still very deeply regret for the slow action we could take. Along similar lines, we also had a project to work with the female prisoners in the open prison in Tawaka. We had the funds in this case. We had the plan. We were ready to execute it, but then the police took time to get the permission to do that project, and our funders had to eventually withdraw the funding because the police permission didn't come through on time. So there is definitely acute need for us to intervene in especially the young graduates of these prison centers, detention centers. So thank you for raising it. That's Dr. Phuntsho.
I wanted to say that when YDRC started, which one? Can you hear me? Anyway, when YDRC started way back, probably 20 years ago, I think. So I had an opportunity to visit there to have a look at what is going on there, and I was very surprised because the young people are marching on the ground there, and I asked the policeman, "What are you training these guys for?" So they saying, "We are just training as we were trained." Are you going to put them in the police force No, not at all. They are all delinquents. You cannot go in the police force. That's when I think I went to, and we discussed with Save the Children at the time. So I got a small amount of money to actually open up a counseling center and send some of these police officers for counseling training. And then I introduced a sort of something called therapeutic community models, where there's a bit of a self-disciplining and also peer pressure to conform to rules and disciplines. Because a lot of these delinquents, they don't have discipline in their life. They don't have structure in their life. So the structure was okay. The policemen were initially very confused because counseling and police discipline is completely different. So I had difficulty actually trying to wash the brains. It's difficult to wash the brains after you have been drilled for so many years in that. But 1 year later, I went down there, and then I asked this policeman, "What have you done?" After we had this counseling session, and I introduced this so-called therapeutic community tools in their discipline. So one of the senior sergeants got up and said, "Well, I stopped beating my child at home." Well, that is the first step. Challenge begins at home. Because they were showing a lot of their frustrations on the children. The soldiers, they show their frustration on the children. Because at work, they are frustrated. They can't voice their thing. And then come home and they beat their wives and children. If the wives are stronger, then the children are bitter. So, no, there was change. But I wish that YDRC was run by an organization other than the police. Unfortunately, in Bhutan, even the prisons are handled by the police. They are not equipped to do so. So I have great concerns. A lot of the young people are locked up in jails because of possession of those drugs, SPs. I have been monitoring our Parental and the Bhutanese. I'm monitoring them because I'm also an activist, but I'm not supposed to be because I'm a civil servant. So they can. But somebody has to raise his voice. And I think His Excellency Gerard knows I'm a bit of a blunt, die-hard sort of thing, but some things slip out of my mouth. But it has to be. So yeah, hopefully, I know Karma comes with a lot of questions, prepared ones, so I'm actually preempting him. Next time when he interviews me, I'm going to put some of my agenda on the desk, and that's what I want you to now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, please be blunt, and I think the society will benefit from it. Any other question? I'll take one last question if you have. Please, yes, the young lady here.
Correct me if I got it wrong, but in the beginning of this dialogue, I heard something like youth are complex and complicated. But I look at it as something being part of human, Don't you think so? Also because just like you don't understand young people, our parents and our grandparents don't understand, I don't think we understand sometimes at some point our parents and our grandparents either. So I think, do you really think young people are very complex and very different than what
Can you introduce yourself, young lady?
I'm Karma.
So, you're asking me? What would you like to be called? Simple and just, you see through kind of a thing, or complex and raised at curiosity? What would you like to be? How would you like we to describe you?
Us?
Yes.
Same, humans. We are complex and we are problematic at times.
So it's good to be referred as complex, because when there's a complexity, then there is this, we want to know more, we need to do more, we need to understand. It's when that is not there, then it's like, this is a door, this is a camera, we understand what it is, we know what's its function. So I think it's good to be complex, because then there's so much of learning that takes place and understanding that takes place. I think that's why we say complex. Don't worry, even adults, like when you reach mothers, when you're a mother or a father or a grandmother or a grandfather, it's highly complex. You know nothing about complexity just now. Everything is provided on a silver platter, okay? But it's when that is gone, then life starts.
But I think young people are facing more complex world, that they are now bombarded with not just the local Bhutanese cultural information, but the global information. So in that respect, I would say lives of young people are far more complex and tricky than it used to be when I grew up as a teenager. But then to clarify, the complexity we were discussing earlier was more about youth issues being very complex rather than youth personalities. Now, I would like to, as we don't have time, wrap up. I have one last question. Sorry, Jerry.
I have two questions to to give you the opportunity to speak to two topics if you so wish. The first topic is, I know that you personally have a lot of international experience, and the wellness center that is in Saluna is very, very innovative. You're doing, there's some very, very interesting meditation techniques that I think are very innovative, very effective. Perhaps it might be useful for you to share that with the audience. That's the first topic. The second topic is more focusing on woman, female leadership in this country. I mean, we are all aware that we may not have as many female representatives on the National Council as many of us would like. Let's see what happens in the October elections, how many leaders, female leaders we're going to have. Perhaps we don't have as many female leaders within government circles, at the executive level. But we do seem to be very fortunate in terms of female leadership of the CSOs, which I believe strengthens the CSO community. So do you have any thoughts or suggestions in terms of how we can give equal voice to the leadership of women in this great country?
So the first, I think this, Gerald actually happened to be, I think, during the UNDP retreat at the Institute of Wellbeing. We have this, the GNH values, and I think it's very similar to universal human values. So we have a program, and it's called the Silent Journey. The Silent Journey is a journey that you do in total silence. And it's a journey where you do not talk, you actually move around in your groups to different rooms. And these rooms are created with certain reflections. So you have the green room, the white room, the black room, the blue room. So we have, when you go into this room, you experience, it's an experiential journey in total silence. So you are there with your thoughts, with yourself. You can't even communicate sign language. So as you journey through this and you go through these different rooms, there are certain things that sort of speaks to you. And it is up to you how you want to interpret it. And some of these things touch certain part in your emotional body. And you come out of that with a lot of questions. And of course, with that comes a lot of emotions and a lot of, I think, a lot of tears, a lot of reflections. And what is amazing is once you have experienced this 1 hour journey, a journey that we all actually go through, but we have never really paid attention to that. We think that we are just living, day to day. But that 1 hour is actually a whole life's journey and beyond, which is experienced magically in that 1 hour. And then at the end of the journey, you have a reflection. And that's where a lot of emotional breakdown, it's not like breakdown, but it's more like awareness. And when you touch your inner self, it is really, really powerful. So this is a journey that and it's actually 1 hour, it's like a meditation. It's not like sitting, closing your eyes and focusing at an object. Very, very powerful. And this has been highly successful at all levels. And I would like all of you to experience this journey. You haven't experienced this. I'm sure you didn't even experience that when you are a monk.
Unfortunately, I'm not into New Agey practices, which I would like to try. Yeah, but please continue.
So this is a journey that I think, Gerald, you wanted me to share. Then the other thing is you're talking about encouraging women to come out as leaders. Yes, if you look at the CSO, all at the executive level are women. And just to give you a short background of how CSO started, I think the oldest CSO at that time was RSPN. And the oldest was NWAB, where it was a woman. I think it was Ajusonam,
is
the sister of the third king, the fourth king, and then Tashdodem, the first women Tasho. So we did have those. But if you look at the women leader then, Tashdodem was not married, didn't have children, so she had a lot of time. Then the second CSO, oldest CSO is RSPN. Now RSPN, there's a man, no women there, the leader. And then after that came the YDF. And then, because YDF actually, by the way, YDF did not start off as a CSO, it started as a project under the Ministry of Education. Because His Majesty, the fourth king, was very worried about what problems would come, and he wanted to have a mechanism that could offer that fund whenever it was available. So he gave $1 million USD, and then, like the Queen Mother, Ajit Ringpen, the president, she always says, by default, I happen to be in YDF. At that time, we had no idea what an NGO was. And I was on secondment from the government with the previous ED, Amiande Penjo. So 2 women were sent there. And then, of course, the president was Her Majesty. Then came Renew. So if you look at this, all those who initiated this actually are women. And so we already have that leadership there. You are right when you say that maybe in the National Assembly we have very poor representation there. But analytical, surveys have showed that when we vote for women, because it's all election, we were not elected, by the way. Okay, we were put there. Okay, so when an election procedure is there, then what happens is women tend to judge the women very harsh. We are so detailed, So it's easier to put a man, because a man listens to what a woman says anyway, So I think that maybe these are, and also the responsibilities and all that. So, but don't worry, in Bhutan, we don't feel we are discriminated and we just are the great behind the successful men.
But somehow there is a pattern that among state institutions there are far fewer female representation. When you look at the legislative body, very few women. You look at, for instance, the school principals. The government schools are mostly headed by men. But look at the private schools, they're mostly headed by women. So there is a pattern which we need to question and address. But
so it's the men then who's there as the Minister of Education? Who's there? I mean, you look at all this, and then and like I was saying, they would rather put somebody they think that probably thinks like them.
As we are already about 2 minutes over our time, I have, as a ritual of Bhutan Dialogues, my last question. We offer 2 books as a token of gratitude to the speakers, and we ask them to choose the books and then tell us why they chose the books. You bought these 2 books here. Please tell us briefly why you chose these 2 books.
Okay, so actually I wanted 2 other books.
You wanted 4?
No, I wanted, but those books were not available. So I read those books, and my priorities are those 2 books. One is The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. It talks about the ego and how we are functioning there with that ego body. Very, very profound. And then also Eckhart Tolle, this same author, The Power of Now. This was written by Eckhart Tolle when he was a miserable being. In his 20s, late 20s, he almost committed suicide. And when he was committing, he decided to kill himself. And then he realized, he said, I cannot live with myself anymore. And that question kept going, that statement, I cannot live with myself anymore. And then he said, I cannot live with myself. So who is this I and who is this myself? And that's when he started, he saw this light and all this, he understood everything. And then now he is like a teacher. Very, very, I don't know if you're familiar with this Eckhart Tolle. Fantastic book, please read. The one I want, after this, if I would like to encourage you to read The Good Earth, another fantastic book of his. The other book that I actually wanted to give away, was Kathleen Boo, Behind the Beautiful Forevers.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes, such a beautiful, it's easy to read. I read it in 2 days, okay? And it's about this journalist, American journalist who married an Indian and then goes to this slum area next to the airport. And then she actually lived there for, I think, 4 years.
Yeah.
Beautiful book.
A fabulous book.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And then there, and why I like the two books is because there it describes the how human beings, of course poverty is something that is separated, but yet basically the human nature is the same. It's so beautiful. So I encourage you, Kathleen Boo, B-O-O, okay? And fantastic book, Behind the Beautiful Forevers, and that is actually a wall between the big hotel and this slum in the airport. And then there is this wall that divides, and there they were advertising the tiles, beautiful tiles, Italian tiles, and the advertisement was behind forever, beautiful forever. So the title of the book is from that. It's a fantastic book. You will reflect a lot on it. And this is a book that I was recommended also. I haven't read it. The Emperor of All Maladies. Anyone who's read this book? It's a biography of cancer. So he was actually a doctor, and he looks at the history of cancer. And now you know that cancer is something that the minute you say cancer, oh, I'm dead. No? Cancer means you're dead. You're no more living. So this is a story of this doctor who actually writes, and the people who tells the stories, his research is based on real patients, his patients. And if you read this, you will get by the way, maladies, disease, okay, an ailment. So the emperor of all maladies, and cancer is very rampant here. So if you read this, I haven't read it, I'm really looking forward to. Don't get worried about this. Look at what is inside, and I encourage you to read. The smell of the book, turning the pages and having dog ears should not be a legend. I mean, sometimes switch off your iPad and switch off your Kindle.
Kindle.
And Kindle. I wanted to buy a Kindle. I said no. Books, get to carry it. They're so wonderful. My husband and I, we no more. He doesn't buy me diamond rings and expensive gifts and all. He buys me books. So, not in retaliation, because I love that gift. So I also give him gifts of books of my choice. Okay. So read. I encourage you. Please read. Switch off your mobile phones and get a hold of one of the books and read.
Yeah. So thank you very much, for that remark, because one of the reasons why we also choose to reward our guest speakers with books is to encourage young people to take interest in physical books, to get interested in reading. And the final ritual that we follow rather rigorously is I share a piece of Bhutanese traditional wisdom to end the session. And for today, as we are talking about youth matters in development, I thought we'll just go back to our ancestors and bring one of the proverbs about youth. Michi on chunle, tachi on tiule. A person shows his or her worth even when young. A horse shows even when a colt. So for the young people, don't wait for a later stage in life to be successful, to be responsible, to be active. Do it now as a young person, when you are agile, when you have vigor, when you have sharpness, when you have your intelligence. And with that, thank you all for coming to this session, and join us at the refreshments after this. And thank you very much for taking time out to be with us.
Thank you, UNDP, for having me here. It's been a great learning experience.